At the center of this story are two couples. Isabella and Russell Hawthorne, a pair in their early 50s, had been a steady presence in the community for more than 20 years. They were the couple everyone admired. Successful, well-respected, and appearing to have a strong marriage, the Hawthornes' home was frequently the hub for neighborhood get-togethers. Just a few houses away, newlyweds Zara and Eric Donovan had recently settled into the neighborhood. In their mid-20s, they added a fresh, youthful vibe to a street largely populated by older families and retirees. The Donovans' arrival sparked curiosity and warmth from their new neighbors, especially the Hawthornes. No one could have predicted that these four lives would soon become tangled in a dangerous web of desire, obsession, and murder. What started as a bold venture into sexual exploration quickly spiraled into a nightmare, leaving one person dead, another imprisoned, and the remaining two haunted by the aftermath of their decisions. This is the story of how an innocent-seeming proposition led to a shocking crime that made national headlines, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. It serves as a cautionary reminder of the hidden dangers lurking beneath seemingly ordinary lives and the tragic outcomes of pushing the boundaries of societal norms. Isabella Hawthorne had always been the golden girl. Growing up in Seattle, Isabella Hawthorne was the kind of person who seemed to have it all. She was the captain of the cheerleading squad, prom queen, and even the valedictorian of her class. But there was more to her than just charm and looks. Isabella was also incredibly smart and driven, with a determination that set her apart from her peers. Isabella met Russell Hawthorne during her second year at the University of Washington. Russell, 2 years older, was the standout quarterback, known for his charm and talent on the field. Their relationship quickly became the talk of campus, a picture-perfect couple that everyone admired. Shortly after Isabella graduated, the two tied the knot, ready to take on life together. However, Russell's dreams of a long football career were dashed when a knee injury sidelined him during his rookie season. Undeterred, he transitioned into sports management, where his natural leadership skills and connections helped him rise quickly through the ranks. Isabella, on the other hand, built a successful career in marketing, where her creativity and ambition made her stand out. Around the time they welcomed their daughter, Lily, they moved to a new neighborhood, balancing the demands of both parenthood and their flourishing careers. Both seemed to manage it all with ease, solidifying their reputation as the perfect family. Beneath the surface, tensions were growing. The pressures of maintaining their image, coupled with the strains of work and parenthood, began to take a toll on their relationship. What once seemed like a picture-perfect life slowly revealed its flaws as the Hawthornes found themselves drifting apart, the passion and connection that once defined their marriage fading into the background. As Russell's job demanded more of his time, he began spending long periods away from home. The strain showed physically as well, with his once athletic physique giving way to extra pounds. Meanwhile, Isabella struggled with a growing sense of restlessness. With Lily off at college and her career no longer fulfilling, she found herself yearning for something more to reignite the spark in her life. Feeling unfulfilled, Isabella started exploring new interests, taking up yoga and joining a book club in hopes of filling the void she felt. As she observed the youthful couples around her, their passion and carefree joy seemed like a stark contrast to her own life, deepening her sense of longing for something more vibrant and exciting. With their intimacy dwindling, Isabella found herself reflecting on the last time she and Russell had truly connected. While Russell remained absorbed in his work and his evening TV routine, their interactions had become routine and shallow, revolving around mundane topics like bills and home upkeep. As her 50th birthday neared, Isabella's feelings of dissatisfaction intensified, fueling a growing sense of urgency and fear about the future. Was this all there was to her life? Once celebrated for her potential, Isabella now felt ensnared in a luxurious but stifling routine. It was during this period of discontent that she encountered Eric Donovan. Young and striking, with a swimmer's physique, Eric embodied everything that Isabella felt was lacking in her own existence. The thrill of excitement, passion, and the allure of adventure rekindled a spark within Isabella. Watching Eric and Zara Donovan settle into the neighborhood, she found herself captivated by the possibilities. An idea began to take shape in her mind, one that promised to break the monotony of her life. Zara Donovan, formerly Zara Khalil, was the daughter of Lebanese immigrants who had made their home in Portland. Torn between her parents' traditional values and the liberal, free-spirited culture of the Pacific Northwest, Zara had spent her life navigating this cultural divide. With her olive skin, Zara stood out in a predominantly white city. From a young age, she was passionate about art, but her parents, though supportive, stressed the importance of a practical career. As a compromise, Zara studied graphic design at Portland State University, blending her creativity with a practical skill. During her final year, while working on her thesis project at a local coffee shop, she met Zara Donovan, who was a barista. He struck up a conversation about her sketches, sparking an instant connection between them. Eric, with his effortless charm and youthful appearance, quickly won Zara over. He had grown up in a small rural town in Oregon as the youngest of 4 brothers in a working-class family. Moving to Portland 3 years earlier, Eric was captivated by the city's vibrant art scene and progressive culture. While working as a barista to make ends meet, Eric's real passion was photography. His Instagram, showcasing moody black and white portraits in stark urban landscapes, had a modest but growing following. His romance with Zara was a whirlwind. Within weeks of meeting, Eric and Zara were inseparable. They spent their days discovering Portland's hidden gems, secret gardens, underground art galleries, and hole-in-the-wall music venues. Eric introduced Zara to urban exploration, while she shared her love for Lebanese cuisine and culture with him. To Zara, Eric symbolized freedom and self-expression. He encouraged her to pursue her art without compromise, urging her to break free from societal and familial expectations. With Eric, Zara felt truly seen and understood for the first time. For Eric, Zara was both muse and anchor. Her quiet strength and unwavering support gave him the confidence to take his photography seriously. He began booking small gigs, weddings, local band shoots, and even a few magazine spreads. Their decision to marry surprised many. Both sets of parents worried about the speed of their relationship, but Eric and Zara were certain they had found their soulmates. They opted for a small ceremony in a sculpture garden, celebrating with their closest friends and family. Their move was practical. As freelancers, they needed a space that could double as both home and studio. The quiet suburb provided affordable housing while still being close enough to the city for work opportunities. They saw it as the perfect place to start their life together, imagining lazy Sunday mornings in their backyard and cozy evenings planning their future. Unbeknownst to them, their new neighborhood harbored secrets and temptations that would test their young love. As they settled into their new home, neither Eric nor Zara could have foreseen the turmoil and devastating consequences that awaited them. The annual summer block party was a beloved tradition on Sycamore Lane, stretching back decades. Each year, on the last Saturday of August, the street transformed into a lively fairground. Neighbors would set up grills, coolers filled with drinks, and tables brimming with potluck dishes. Children darted around with water guns and bubble wands, while adults exchanged neighborhood gossip and enjoyed cold beers. This year's party was particularly special, as it marked the official welcome for the Donovans, the newest members of Sycamore Lane. Isabella Hawthorne, the neighborhood's unofficial social director, had taken it upon herself to make Zara and Eric feel at home. As the afternoon sun bathed Sycamore Lane in a warm glow, Isabella approached the Donovans, who were standing somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the gathering. "Isabella, you look lovely," Zara said, smiling as she noticed Isabella's approach. Russell called out as she walked by, her sundress gently swaying. She responded with a smile, but her attention was clearly on Eric. "Eric and Zara, welcome to the neighborhood," Isabella said warmly, kissing Zara's cheeks and letting her hand linger just a bit too long on Eric's arm. "We're so glad you could join us," Isabella said with a bright smile. The conversation flowed effortlessly, aided by the fruity sangria she had brought. Zara was soon engrossed in a discussion about local art galleries with other neighbors. While Eric and Isabella drifted toward the Hawthornes' front yard. "You have a beautiful home," Eric remarked, his gaze sweeping over the house. Isabella's face lit up with pride. "Thank you," she replied, her tone warm and appreciative. "You should see the inside." Isabella said with a playful edge, "We just renovated the master bathroom. Maybe I could give you a tour sometime, give you some ideas for your own place." The flirtatious undertone in her voice was clear. Eric, slightly taken aback but intrigued, felt a flush creep up his neck. Before he could respond, Russell appeared, clapping a hand on Eric's shoulder. "Hope my wife isn't talking your ear off," Russell chuckled, his tone light-hearted. Isabella shot Russell a look that combined annoyance with affection. "Actually, she was just offering to show me your renovation," Eric said, his voice carrying a hint of strain. As the evening continued, the two couples naturally gravitated towards each other, engaging in deeper conversations and sharing more personal stories. Zara, amused by Russell's dad jokes and touched by his genuine interest in her artwork, finally felt at ease since their move. Isabella, on the other hand, was captivated by Eric's stories about his photography projects. As the party drew to a close, the air was thick with unspoken connections and the beginnings of something none of them could foresee. A week after the block party, Isabella brought up the topic with Russell. They were lying in bed, the TV murmuring softly in the background, when Isabella turned to her husband with a hint of mischief in her eyes. Her tone was light, but there was a spark of excitement as she asked if he'd ever thought about adding a little excitement to their love life. Russell, groggy and barely awake, mumbled something indistinct at first. Isabella gently clarified, focusing on what she meant specifically in the bedroom. This piqued Russell's interest, and he straightened up, now fully attentive. Carefully, he asked Isabella to clarify her idea. Taking a moment to gather her thoughts, Isabella proposed that they consider swapping partners with another couple. The silence that followed was palpable. Russell looked at Isabella, trying to gauge whether she was serious. As it sank in that she was, his expression shifted through shock, curiosity, and a flicker of excitement. In the days that followed, the Hawthornes had several conversations about Isabella's suggestion. Although Russell was initially reluctant, he began to find the idea appealing. The notion of being with someone younger rekindled feelings he had long thought were gone. Isabella was the one who eventually proposed the Donovans as potential partners. "They're young, attractive, and new to the neighborhood," she said. "They might be open to something like this." At a neighborhood barbecue, Isabella, having had a few glasses of wine, decided to approach Zara. She pulled her aside for a private chat. The conversation started off awkwardly as Isabella hesitated, but once she presented the idea, Zara's response was unexpected. Rather than showing outrage or disgust, Zara's eyes reflected curiosity. When the evening of the swap arrived, both couples were filled with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The Hawthornes had suggested hosting at their home, using their finished basement as a discreet, private space. As Zara and Eric approached the driveway, Zara felt her heart race. "Are we really doing this?" she whispered. Eric squeezed her hand in reassurance, though his own eyes betrayed his unease. When Isabella answered the door, her smile was overly bright, and her laughter seemed louder than usual. The atmosphere was thick with forced ease as they sipped on expensive red wine and made small talk. Russell tried to lighten the mood by setting up a jazz playlist on the stereo. After what felt like an endless stretch of awkward conversation, Isabella finally rose from her seat. Isabella's voice was a whisper as she asked, "Shall we?" The pairings had been set, Isabella with Eric and Russell with Zara. As they moved to separate rooms, Zara cast a last, fleeting look at Eric. Uncertainty flickered between them before he followed Isabella down the hallway, leaving Zara alone with Russell. Russell guided Zara to the guest bedroom, his hand lightly resting on her back. Despite his earlier confidence, he felt a surge of nervousness. It had been years since he had been with anyone other than Isabella. Zara, sensing his hesitation, took the initiative. She reached up and kissed him softly, then more passionately. Russell responded, his hands exploring her young, firm body with growing confidence. In the master bedroom, Isabella was immersed in the fantasy she had envisioned since meeting Eric. His youthful energy and enthusiasm reignited a sense of desire and vitality within her that she hadn't felt in years. Eric, captivated by Isabella's confidence and allure, was swept up in the intensity of the moment. As the encounters came to an end, a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, pleasure, guilt, and a surprising emptiness overwhelmed each person. When they gathered again in the living room, the atmosphere was thick with an uncomfortable silence, each of them grappling with the weight of their choices. The weight of their actions settled heavily on them all at once. Zara avoided Eric's gaze, her fingers fidgeting with imaginary wrinkles in her dress. Russell cleared his throat repeatedly, searching for words that seemed to escape him. The room was filled with a tense, uneasy silence. Only Isabella appeared genuinely relaxed, a contented smile lingering on her lips. It was Eric who finally shattered the silence, his voice trying to sound casual but missing the mark. "Well," he began, the word hanging awkwardly in the air. That was something Eric said, breaking the tension and sparking a bout of nervous laughter. The group continued with stilted small talk for a few more minutes before the Donovans made their excuses and departed. As Zara and Eric walked home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, they were unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in their relationships. Back at the Hawthorne house, Isabella hummed to herself while tidying up, already contemplating the next time. Russell watched Isabella with a growing sense of unease. None of them realized that this night was merely the beginning, a first step down a path leading to obsession, betrayal, and ultimately tragedy. In the days following the swap, life seemed to return to normal, but beneath the surface, changes were brewing, particularly within Eric Donovan. Eric couldn't shake the thoughts of Isabella from his mind. The encounter had stirred something in him, a craving he hadn't felt before. He started finding reasons to be outside, hoping to catch glimpses of Isabella as she left for work. Zara quickly picked up on Eric's new behavior. He was frequently distracted, his mind seemingly elsewhere. She noticed how his attention seemed to drift, and he often appeared lost in thought. Zara arrived home early from a client meeting to find Eric's photography workspace in disarray. The usual neatness was replaced by scattered prints and unorganized equipment, a reflection of his preoccupied state of mind. As she tidied up, Zara stumbled upon a folder hidden under a stack of prints. Inside were photos of Isabella, some taken from a distance, showing her gardening, retrieving her mail, or walking to her car. Others were more invasive, zoomed-in shots through windows, showing Isabella in various states of undress. Zara's stomach churned as she realized this wasn't just a fleeting attraction or a side effect of their encounter. Initially, Isabella was flattered by Eric's frequent presence and attention. She responded with flirtatious glances and casual touches during their encounters. However, as his behavior grew more persistent and intrusive, she began to sense that things were becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Eric's behavior quickly escalated from infatuation to obsession. His messages came at all hours, ranging from passionate declarations to angry outbursts when Isabella didn't reply immediately. Despite her attempts to gently end things, explaining their encounter was meant to be a one-time event, Eric couldn't accept her rejection. One night, Isabella was jolted awake by a loud noise against her bedroom window. Peering outside, she saw Eric standing in her front yard, clutching a handful of pebbles. His eyes were wild and unfocused as he stared directly at her. "I can't live without you, Isabella," he shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. "We're meant to be together," Eric shouted, his voice filled with anguish. Isabella's heart pounded as she hurriedly closed the curtains. She woke Russell, who, still groggy, went outside to confront Eric. By the time Russell reached the front step, Eric was already gone, leaving behind a crumpled bouquet of flowers. As Isabella lay awake that night, she grappled with the chilling realization that their daring experiment had unleashed a dangerous obsession. Little did she know just how dire the consequences would become. In the weeks that followed, Eric's behavior deteriorated rapidly. His obsession with Isabella took over his life, causing him to neglect his photography business. Instead, he spent hours monitoring Isabella's social media and driving past her house, consumed by his fixation. Zara looked on in anguish as her husband became someone she barely recognized. Isabella, meanwhile, was torn between fear and a troubling excitement. She was genuinely scared by Eric's escalating instability, but a part of her, one she was reluctant to acknowledge, was oddly flattered by his obsessive focus. Eric looked up with a haunted expression, his eyes wide and glassy. "I've been trying to reach you," he said, his voice trembling. "I had to see you. We need to talk." Isabella took a step back, her fear mounting. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leave now, or I'll call the police." Eric's smile was chilling, sending a shiver down Isabella's spine. "You gave me a key," he said, his voice cold. "Remember? For when you were on vacation." Isabella's mind raced, remembering that it had been months since she gave him the key, before everything had gone wrong. She should have asked for it back. Why hadn't she? Eric rose smoothly from the couch, approaching her with a disturbing calm. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. "About us. About our future." Isabella stumbled backward, reaching for her phone. "There's nothing to discuss, Eric," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. Isabella's heart raced as she took a step back, her voice trembling. "Yes, I do, Eric. You need to leave now," but he continued forward, his expression intense and unhinged. "No," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "You don't mean that. We belong together." Isabella's breath caught in her throat as Eric's words sunk in. "Eric, this isn't love," she said, her voice shaking. "You're scaring me. Please, just leave before things get worse," but Eric's gaze only hardened. "I know you feel what I feel," he repeated, stepping closer. "We're destined to be together, Isabella. I won't let anyone come between us. Not Russell. Not anyone." As Eric moved toward her, Isabella suddenly screamed. The sharp cry jolted Eric back to reality. He blinked, glancing around as though he was noticing the room for the first time. Without saying anything more, he pushed past Isabella and walked out the front door. Trembling, Isabella sank onto the couch. She knew she should call the police, but what could she tell them? That she had willingly had an affair with her younger neighbor, and now he wouldn't leave her alone. The idea of a scandal, of everyone finding out what she had done, was too much to bear. Isabella had no clue that her silence would lead to tragic consequences. In Eric's disturbed mind, her decision not to report him only confirmed his belief in her hidden love for him. He became fixated on removing anything or anyone that stood in the way of their relationship, no matter the price. The tension that had been simmering for weeks finally exploded one quiet Sunday afternoon. Isabella was home alone, with Russell away playing golf with friends. She was in the kitchen, absent-mindedly flipping through a magazine, when she heard the back door creak open. Isabella's voice quivered as she called out, asking if it was Eric. There was no answer, just the sound of footsteps echoing through the house. Heart pounding, she grabbed a kitchen knife and held it in front of her, using it as a makeshift shield. When Eric appeared in the doorway, his eyes were vacant and unfocused, and he smelled strongly of alcohol. He slurred that he had seen Russell leave and insisted that now they could be together as they were meant to be. Isabella begged him to get help and told him this wasn't right, but she couldn't complete her plea. Eric ignored her pleas and lunged at her, reaching out to grab her. Isabella screamed and swung the knife frantically, slicing into Eric's arm and drawing blood. The sight of his own blood only fueled Eric's rage. He let out a furious shout and charged at her once more. During the ensuing struggle, the knife fell from Isabella's grasp and clattered to the floor. Eric's hands closed around Isabella's throat with a frightening grip. As she gasped for air and her vision started to fade, she clawed at his face in a desperate attempt to free herself. With a sudden, sharp move, she drove her knee into Eric's groin. The impact made Eric double over in agony, loosening his hold on her throat. Isabella quickly scrambled to safety, her hand finding the handle of the fallen knife. As Eric straightened up, his face twisted with fury. Isabella acted on pure instinct. She drove the knife forward, feeling it penetrate Eric's chest. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze as she stared in shock at the scene before her. Eric glanced down in disbelief at the knife embedded in his chest, his anger replaced by shock. Gradually, he collapsed to the floor. Isabella stood there, staring at his lifeless body, as the gravity of her actions sank in. With trembling hands, Isabella grabbed her phone and dialed 911. The serene quiet of the neighborhood was broken by the blare of sirens as police cars and an ambulance arrived at the Hawthorne residence. Neighbors emerged from their homes, stunned, as paramedics hurried inside. They soon came out, their faces solemn and shaking their heads in sorrow. Detective Liam Reeves, a seasoned investigator with the Portland Police Department, arrived at the scene to find Isabella Hawthorne being questioned by officers. Her hands and clothes were covered in blood, and her eyes betrayed a mix of shock and terror. As Reeves drew closer, he caught fragments of Isabella's account of what had happened. Isabella was insisting that Eric had attacked her and that she had acted in self-defense, her voice filled with shock and disbelief over the events. Detective Reeves took control of the situation, directing a comprehensive search of the house and the surrounding area. As crime scene technicians meticulously examined the kitchen, documenting the bloody knife and signs of a struggle, Reeves began questioning the neighbors for any additional information or witnesses. Zara Donovan stood at the edge of the police tape, her expression a mix of shock and horror. Detective Reeves approached her with a gentle demeanor, introducing himself and confirming that the victim was her husband. Zara nodded silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. When Reeves asked Zara about the last time she had seen Eric, she barely managed to say it had been that morning. She explained that Eric had mentioned going for a walk, but her voice faltered as she tried to grasp the gravity of the situation. Overwhelmed, she began to cry uncontrollably, unable to say more. Reeves jotted down notes before turning to question other neighbors. As he pieced together their accounts, a picture began to form of a once peaceful neighborhood now shattered by a shocking crime. As Eric Donovan's body was wheeled out on a gurney, covered by a sheet, Reeves couldn't shake the sense that this case was more complex than a mere home invasion gone wrong. The expression in Isabella Hawthorne's eyes, a blend of relief and guilt, suggested to Reeves that uncovering the truth would be both intricate and sensitive. In the days after Eric's death, Detective Reeves thoroughly investigated the lives of both the Hawthornes and the Donovans. What he discovered was a complex web of secrets and deceit, revealing a much more complicated story than the initial narrative of a random break-in. Interviews with neighbors hinted at a secret affair between Isabella and Eric. Cell phone records revealed a flood of calls and messages from Eric to Isabella in the weeks before the incident, most of which she had ignored. However, the real breakthrough came with the discovery of Eric's photography studio, which significantly altered the direction of the investigation. Among Eric's professional equipment, detectives discovered a camera with a high-powered zoom lens and memory cards containing hundreds of photos of Isabella, many taken without her knowledge. When presented with this evidence, Zara broke down in tears. She revealed through her sobs the truth about the partner swap and the obsessive fixation that had consumed her husband. Zara described Eric's erratic behavior, his disregard for their marriage, and her growing concerns about his mental state. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence, Isabella eventually confessed to the entire story. She admitted to the affair and the stalking, but insisted that the final confrontation was an act of self-defense. Russell, though heartbroken by his wife's betrayal, remained by her side throughout the ordeal. As Reeves reconstructed the events leading up to that fateful Sunday afternoon, he was deeply affected by the tragedy. What had started as a misguided effort to rejuvenate a troubled marriage had spiraled into an obsession, resulting in a young man's death and irrevocably altering the lives of everyone involved. What was initially perceived as a simple home invasion had unfolded into a complex narrative of desire, betrayal, and lethal obsession. The prosecution portrayed Isabella as a discontented housewife who had embarked on an affair with a younger man and then murdered him to cover up her infidelity. They highlighted the premeditated aspect of her actions, noting the coincidental absence of her husband on the day of the crime. The defense, spearheaded by prominent attorney Simone Jeffries, contended vigorously that Isabella was a victim of stalking and harassment who acted out of self-defense. They introduced evidence of Eric's obsessive behavior and enlisted expert witnesses to discuss the psychological effects of stalking on victims. Zara's testimony became a pivotal moment in the trial, significantly influencing the proceedings. Zara's heartfelt testimony about Eric's deteriorating obsession and her fear for Isabella's safety resonated with the jury. Through tears, she implored, "She's not the monster they're making her out to be." Eric wasn't himself at the end. Her emotional account shifted perceptions and added depth to the case. In his closing arguments, the prosecutor acknowledged the tragedy of the situation but urged the jury to focus on the facts. He cautioned them not to be influenced by emotion, emphasizing that Isabella's actions, despite the context, had to be judged on their own merits. "The facts are clear," he asserted. "Mrs. Hawthorne made a series of decisions that led to this tragic outcome. She must be held accountable for her actions." In her rebuttal, Simone Jeffries appealed to the jury's sense of empathy. "Imagine being in Isabella's position," she urged. Terrified and alone, faced with a man who had been stalking her for weeks, she acted in the moment of fear. She did what anyone might do. She fought for her life, Simone Jeffries concluded. As the jury left to start their deliberations, the courtroom was abuzz with speculation. The outcome for Isabella Hawthorne and the resolution of this suburban tragedy now lay in their hands. Isabella Hawthorne was sentenced to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3. As she was escorted away from the courtroom, the weight of the tragedy on everyone involved was evident. Russell Hawthorne, his face drawn and weary from the trial's strain, watched silently as his wife vanished through the courtroom doors. Despite the revelations of her infidelity, Russell had remained by Isabella's side throughout the ordeal. Now he faced the daunting reality of years alone, dealing with the fallout from their ill-fated experiment. Meanwhile, Zara Donovan, now widowed and isolated, withdrew from the public eye, grappling with her own profound loss. The trauma of losing Eric and the public scrutiny of their private lives left Zara deeply scarred. She channeled her anguish into her art, creating a series of haunting paintings that would later be recognized as a poignant exploration of grief and betrayal. Meanwhile, the community wrestled with the aftermath of the events that had upended their once peaceful lives. The Hawthorne and Donovan homes remained empty, stark reminders of the tragedy that had transpired. Some neighbors moved away, unable to endure the painful memories, while those who stayed found their trust in each other irrevocably changed.